so it is 2 p.m. Eastern time. We have a lot to cover, so I am going to go ahead and get us started. I would just like to say thank you again for coming to our webinar. On military connected children in the education system. And I would like to introduce your moderator for the webinar, Ms. Stacy Owens. Ms. Owens serves as SAMHSA's Military and Veteran Affairs Liaison. And in this role, she facilitates collaborative efforts to enhance mental health for service members, veterans, and their families. With 20 years of diverse healthcare experience, she previously served as a public health advisor in SAMHSA Center for Substance Abuse Treatment. Prior to SAMHSA, Ms. Owens dedicated 13 years as a clinical social worker for the SMVF population at VA and DOD. Alongside, she worked as a PRN, mental health clinician, conducting suicide risk assessments for incarcerated individuals. Ms. Owens hails from a proud military family. Her father is an Army retiree. Both grandfathers were combat veterans, and her niece is a cadet at the United States Military Academy at West Point. So with no further ado, Stacy, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chantel, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar on supporting military-connected children in the education system. November is an important month in our nation because Veterans Day provides a special occasion for us to pay our respects to those who've served. In addition to Veterans Day, November is designated as National Veterans and Military Families Month, and it's a great reminder that military families as a whole bear the impact of service. As such, it's also a great opportunity and time to raise awareness of challenges faced by military kids and discuss ways to increase support. Next slide, please. Before we begin, please note that the views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation may not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of SAMHSA and HHS. Next slide, please. This webinar is being sponsored by SAMHSA's Service Members, Veterans, and Their Families Technical Assistance Center, which partners with states, territories, and communities to increase behavioral health support for the SMVF community. SAMHSA is the agency within the Department of Health and Human Services that leads efforts to ensure that mental health and substance use treatment needs of all Americans are understood, including the needs of the SMVF community. Next slide, please. Since its inception, the SMVF TA Center really serves to strengthen military and civilian partnerships, provide a centralized platform for connection between jurisdictions, increase awareness of and access to resources to improve the behavioral health of SMVF, and also encouraging implementation of best practices. Next slide, please. The TA Center does this through academies, crisis intercept mapping workshops, webinars like this one, smaller learning communities and technical assistance calls, as well as subject matter expert consultation and resource dissemination. Next slide. So let's take a look at our learning objectives for today. We'll spend some time understanding how national best practices for comprehensive school mental health systems are adapted and incorporated. We'll identify components of an MTSS to reinforce the mental health and well-being of military-connected youth. We'll describe the Purple Star School program and how it helps schools respond to the educational and social emotional challenges faced by military kids during transitions. And we'll also discuss how the combination of MTSS, comprehensive school counseling programs, and the Purple Star School initiatives come together to help support community partners working with military-connected youth. Next slide, please. We have 4 dynamic presenters that we're excited to bring before you as we discuss this important topic. First, we will have Ms. Sue Lopez, who serves as instructional designer with the Military Child Education Coalition, also known as MSEC. She's a licensed school counselor by profession. She's a military spouse. She's raised 2 military kids, and she's worked in multiple school settings, including Department of Defense education activity schools. Her work with MSEC focuses on enhancing partnerships between school districts, military installations, and community leaders to effectively support transitioning military families. Then we'll hear from Dan Dunham, who serves as military student and family specialist with Virginia State's Department of Education. Dan grew up as a military kid himself, with both of his parents serving on active duty. During his school years, he attended 6 elementary schools, 1 middle school, and 5 high schools. He worked as an educator for 30 years, and prior to his position with the state of Virginia, he served as the Naval District Washington Regional School Liaison Officer. Um, Professionally and personally, he's definitely uniquely positioned to support the needs of military kids. And then we'll hear from Dr. Gregory Leskin, who's the director of the Military and Veteran Families Program with the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. Uh, he's a licensed psychologist who focuses on education, training, and resources on military culture, screening, assessment, and evidence based interventions. He's also the principal program developer and director for the NCTSN's DoD Academy on Child Trauma. He's written, consulted, and lectured extensively on the topics of assessment and treatment for PTSD and the impact of deployment on families and children, with a focus on promoting psychological resilience. And last but not least, we will hear from Dr. Sharon Hoover. She's a professor with the University of Maryland's Child and Adolescent Psychiatry program. She is the director of the National Center for Safe Supportive Schools and the co-director for the National Center for School Mental Health. In these roles, she leads national efforts to support states, districts, and schools in the adoption of national performance standards of comprehensive school mental health systems. She's worked for over 2 decades in partnership with HHS, Department of Education, and other entities to train state and community education and behavioral health leaders in supporting the needs of mental health and psychological trauma in schools. So we are definitely well positioned to hear from a great group today. And next slide, please. With that, I will turn things over to Ms. Sue Lopez.
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to say thank you to SAMHSA Serving Military Veteran and Family Technical Center for allowing us the opportunity to share MSEC programming and how we come alongside community leaders, installation leaders, and school campus leaders to support military connected students and families. And so we are a recently retired military family of 26 years, and I have 2 young adults who experienced 14 school moves and 6 deployments over the last 26 years. So this is very important and near and dear to my heart. And so thrilled to be here today to join you. Today, I'd like to highlight some of the collaborative efforts that MSEC has with the National Child Trauma Stress Network, the other national organizations, and state education leaders to support military families and students' overall well-being and mental health. In particular, I'm going to focus on coordinated efforts of multi-tier systems of support, comprehensive school counseling programs, and Purple Star School initiatives. And this is an integrated model that aims to provide support for a variety of different school settings, whether you're public, school, DODEA, private, all different types of school settings, including homeschool support as well, community and installation partners as well, to foster a holistic approach towards overall well-being for military connected students. So MSEC supports all military connected children by educating, advocating, and collaborating to resolve education challenges that are associated with the military lifestyle and transition. So our overall mission is that every military connected child is college, work, and life ready. MSEC serves as the national advocate for the Purple Star School initiatives across the nation. And we aim to support and collaborate with state departments of education like Ohio and Virginia, district leaders, as well as teachers and staff and other education professionals that are in the building working with our students in Purple Star School programs and in general every day. So MSEC does this by providing free virtual Purple Star School support training every month. It's a 2-day training that you can register for. Our next session is in December, and we do them every month throughout the school academic year. We also provide monthly cohort groups for Purple Star schools in Texas, Alabama, and South Carolina through our professional learning centers to create a learning model in a community. So MSEC really aims to help provide implementation, standards, best practices for sustainment of Purple Star programming so that real lasting change and exists and takes place inside of a school building. So our goal is to encourage and walk alongside education leaders, peer-to-peer program sponsors, for example, like student to student, and help to resolve transition issues, but also to foster sense of belonging and connectedness in a school setting, but also in a new community. So we'll drop in the chat box registration links for those trainings, and you can find information on the MSEC website about our Purple Star School programming as well. And so we first need to address on the next slide, who are military connected children? And I think a common misconception is that military connected students attend DODEA schools, and they do, but they also are homeschooled, and you find it interesting that a majority of students, over 80%, attend public schools. And so we want to support those public schools around military installations and those schools that are rural schools that may have veteran and retiree families. And so military connected children are defined as those who have one parent or guardian serving in the United States Armed Forces, including active duty, reserves, and National Guard, as well as those who have parents who have recently left the military by discharge, a veteran or a retiree. So according to the U.S. Department of Defense profile on military communities, 1.6 million military connected children and students are in our public schools, in our school systems, and 36% of them are under the age of 5. And nearly 2/3 of select reserve children are under the age of 12. And so it's really important to support schools who have our children for the majority of the day. And military connected students are in every zip code in the United States. So we all Purple Star School initiatives are really trying to help meet the needs of all types of school settings. And so on the next slide, you'll see that the map is turning purple, and we love Purple Star School initiatives across our nation. And there are 40 current states with legislation and current states pending. But Purple Star schools are committed to supporting the unique needs, academic and social emotional needs of military connected children, their lifestyle, and through transition. And so the primary goal of Purple Star schools are to equip staff with professional development and to address challenges that are associated with school transition, not to mention just supporting families and students through challenging PCS cycles, deployment cycles, and normal developmental cycles. It's just when children feel a sense of connection and belonging, they tend to do better. So all of these things help ease that transition. So some of those challenges for school transitions are transcript evaluation, enrollment and registration, changing school cultures and climates, changing curricula standards and course offerings, course schedules, and of course, graduation requirements. And so the key aspects of Purple Star School involve streamlining the welcoming and exit transition process and identifying staff point of contact in the building that work with students on a daily basis. And those staff members in a school that support campus transition programs, as well as peer-to-peer student programs like S2S, because they increase communication channels with the family, the school, and the installation and community leaders as well. But it just creates an overall increased engagement of support for military connected students in your school and community. And the MSEC published, MSEC and the Columbia CPEARL report recommends a top-down approach from the state down to the building level approach, calling for standardized and high-quality implementation and sustainability with opportunities for growth across all levels of the school system with Purple Star Schools. And we'll drop that link into the chat box as well. So if we could go to the next slide. Again, as I was saying, we've partnered, MSEC has partnered with the Center for Public Research and Leadership to study the evolution and the impact of Purple Star School programming. And we published a report in 2021, but we also published in 2022. And some of the interesting trends and insights came from over 400 stakeholders across 12 states. And so while the Purple Star School program is often implemented at a campus level, it can also be implemented at a district level. And so our report reviews the benefits and the challenges and the effects of COVID and on our children and our deployment cycle and transition cycle and all of those things. And we also provide recommendations for state, district, and school levels in this report. The study recommends, I just lost myself, to follow the 5 components of Purple Star School, which are to have a designated staff point of contact, to provide professional development to your staff on the unique needs of military connected students, as well as to have a designated web page that is updated regularly to provide transitioning families with the information they need to make a successful transition, as well as to create and maintain transition programs within the school and or student peer-to-peer initiatives, and as well as establish annual recognition events, special celebrations, or annual military initiatives. And some states have opted to make those a public announcement of a school board resolution to support military families. Things like celebrating Month of the Military Child in April, or as we stated earlier, November is Month of Veterans and Military Families. And then we also look at providing military employment for spouses as they transition through their career as well. So all of those different states apply these in a variety of different ways, but I think those are all essential in building that school installation and community partnership. So if we could go to the next slide, we'll also drop the CPEARL report. There is the full report and there is a summary as well if you'd like to take a look at those. Right now we want to talk about data and how data is collected for military connected students, which is the key for every point that we're approaching today in our conversation. And so some of you may know about the military student identifier and some of you may not, so I'll just share a little bit about it. In 2015, the military student identifier was incorporated into the Every Student Succeeds Act, initially mandating the collection and reporting of academic assessment data. Initially, it was only for active duty families and active duty National Guard and Reserves, but it has expanded. The ESSA requirement heightens the awareness of the need to collect military student data because it's critical for schools to utilize this data to create programs that support students. And that can be shared at state, district, and school levels. The continued use of the military student identifier organizes and collects measurable data standards, and then enhances, like I said, the educational experience of students through effective implementation of programming like Purple Star Schools. And so in 2018, all 50 states and the District of Columbia were mandated to collect and report MSI data. They also, the states may vary on how they identify as military connected, but it does affect and change the public reporting, and that may vary by state. So in the chat box, MSEC has a document called the Military Student Identifier FAQ, and if you'd like to learn more, we have that in there, and it includes research for all of these touch points and how the MSI has been adapted through the years, including in 2019, and it was expanded to include National Guard, reserves, and veteran members. And it was also mentioned in the 2020 National Defense Authorization Act, and it broadened the use of the ESSA definition of military connected children to include National Guard, Reserve, and veteran associated families. So the 2022 CPRO report is comprehensive in nature, and it defines and encompasses all of those touch points, and is really a wonderful resource to help you implement a Purple Star program in your school effectively to support active duty, National Guard, reserves, and veterans, as well as those families who have paid the ultimate sacrifice in combat. There's a code of federal regulation in Title 34 that describes this in more detail, and we'll drop that into the chat as well. On the next slide, again, I can't express to you enough how important the military student identifier is, but I'd like to share with you the concept of using it as a universal screener. Because if we don't know who our students are and what their affiliation is, we cannot collect data or use that data to inform our process or create systematic ways of identifying students or expanding support for at-risk students, or more importantly, if we don't identify, we can't provide early intervention or garner support from school counselors or school psychologists working with our students. And so I would like to say that it is a universal screening method that can be used to help identify, much like in the comprehensive approach to healthcare, all patients receive a suicide risk assessment. Utilizing the military student identifier as a universal screener helps to ensure systematic identification of at-risk military connected students across all domains, including academic, behavior, social, emotional, and college and career readiness as well. And so on the next slide, MSEC conducted a survey of over 5,000 participants in 2020 to identify social, emotional, and academic concerns from students, parents, teachers, school administrators, and community stakeholders. And so it was demonstrated that we have a prevalent theme of what students say, what parents say, and professionals say. We no longer have to guess because this data exists and has been provided. And so you'll see that parents and students say that acceptance, fitting in, making friends, and managing stress are on their top 5 priorities. And some of our programs like Student to Student can help address all of those things because it helps to create a sense of belonging in your school and connectedness. And so some of the top issues from education professionals are regarding how to deal with, how to support and deal with the stress of the military lifestyle. Education professionals that are not military affiliated They want to know, how can we support them? How can we support family separations? When we see a student struggling with a behavioral or a mental health concern or challenge, how do we support them? And so MSEC offers support through parental programming, student programming, and our professional development and our professional learning communities, as in and other items like our wellbeing toolkit, which we'll drop that into the chat box as well. The next slide, we look at top academic concerns. And I think that you'll find this interesting because students respond. They are thoroughly concerned about, you know, curriculum differences state by state and managing that. And how does it affect their graduation? They're concerned about their gaps in education and lost opportunities, like being able to get enrolled in advanced placement courses or follow 3-year graduation pathways. They're concerned about their transcript evaluation and their course placement. They also are concerned with testing, state testing, AP testing, and graduation requirements. And it's interesting also in the report that 73% of families feel that schools are having difficulties transferring IEPs and evaluating them and continuing services. And so for school professionals managing transitions, 67% report that they don't feel confident in addressing graduation rate waivers and moving incoming rising seniors through that process. And as well, 44% did not feel comfortable assessing transcripts from other schools, but they do it. It is required, but sometimes students fall through the cracks and are required to repeat core foundational and extracurricular courses as well, just to stay on time for graduation. And so in our report, we found that 97% of school professionals believe that military-connected students experience more stress and challenges compared to their peers. We also found that 40% are not confident in their ability to advocate for policy on the behalf of military students and families, and that 45% were not confident in helping them prepare for college or careers due to their transition and where they sit coming into possibly as a rising senior or as a student coming in as a sophomore or junior and missing a 3-year pathway for graduation. And so one of the other more notable facts is that 41% of military families felt that schools don't meet their needs of their students upon transition. And so I think that today we're going to try to help establish how those things can go a little bit better. On the next slide, in the 2022 report, it reveals that both school and staff and families, over 90%, believe that Purple Star programming has a positive impact on military-connected students. And so as a school staff awareness increases, so does the staff perceptions regarding the unique challenges and needs for academic and social emotional support. As you can see in these graphs, district administrators and staff believe that Purple Star programming does positively impact attendance, engagement, academic achievement, as well as social emotional development, because we all know that if a student feels supported, they're going to come to school. And when they don't feel supported, that's the challenge. But I believe that Purple Star schools can help establish a safe culture, a positive culture that would help create an environment where students want to be in that school, where they feel an automatic connection and sense of support and belonging to the school. So parents' perspectives on the next slide, 81% believe that their children have the potential to receive significant academic support, and that when they do receive social emotional support, it increases their grades and their academic well-being. So we're looking at how what is the perception? The students, the parents, the administrators, the schools. I think that we all believe that if we feel supported, then we will do better, and it will improve well-being and mental health challenges. And so on the next slide, I just wanted to point out that the 2022 report is a follow-up on our 21 report, and it provides information on how Purple Star programming is implemented over time, and helps provide program evaluation on how stakeholders have worked to ensure rigor and sustainability. And so what we have found is that there's variations across states, districts, and schools in terms of implementation, and that state and district support play a key role in school campus implementation, compliance, and sustainability. And we all know that things changed a little bit during COVID, and that there was probably a reduction in programming, but there is a request for more support at this time from school staff for more professional development and training on how to support military connected students. And this report also shows that Purple Star schools help to streamline transition processes and increase the overall well-being of students, academically and socially, emotionally. So all states have an obligation under the Military Compact on Education Opportunity for Children to support them. So Purple Star school programming kind of shares those goals that are associated with MIC3 to ensure successful enrollment, course placement, and all the way through to graduation requirements. And so again, it is imperative that there be a top-down approach from the state level down to the school level. In the future of Purple Star School Impact, there are going to be some reports coming out, but you'll be able to see how Purple Star schools are impacting students and families, and how having high quality data on both academic and social emotional outcomes will help aid in this effort to support students. The future direction of Purple Star schools is to increase the awareness, provide evidence-based best practices, and establish support going beyond the basic requirements to serve military connected students, and that they play a significant role in raising just general awareness and support. And so I'm thrilled to share this with you today. If you have more questions, please look at how your state is implementing Purple Star. On the next slide, we have, this is where the triangulation of programming takes place. So I want to just briefly discuss multi-tier systems of support and how MSEC is working with the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, focusing on the mental health and well-being of military connected students. And in 2023 at the MSEC Global Training Summit, we brought together a diverse group of professionals, stakeholders, including mental health professionals, school counselors, school psychologists, social workers, military installation leadership, as well as educators and a few students to share their experience. But we believe that multi-tier systems of support will help to leverage the overall wellness and support for military connected students. I think that, am I over time? Is that what I'm seeing? So there are some resources that we can drop in the chat box about how MTSS provides universal screening, progress monitoring, and providing multi-level prevention systems based on data, and increasing parent involvement in enrollment as well. So I'm sure that Dr. Luskin and Dr. Sharon Hoover will be able to explain more about how these systems work together to support military families. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Ms. Lopez, for your presentation and for all of the services that MSEC provides. I know that we asked a lot of you to to describe that within a short amount of time. So appreciate you doing that. For the attendees, please know that all of the slides will be emailed over to you after the presentation, and we will again hold a few minutes for Q&A at the end. Ms. Lopez, something that you said just really stuck with me. I wrote it down. You said that lasting change takes place inside of school buildings, and that's just a really good way to capture how important it is to support kids within schools. And next, we will hear from Dan Dunham. Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I just also want to repeat, can we go back to the first slide there? I guess well, okay, never mind. Not the very first slide, my first slide, but that's all right. So thank you, Sue, for sharing, to sort of outlining how, you're sort of pushing for, getting the states at the state level to work down, with the schools and making sure that the schools are doing right by military connected students. I think that's very important. And I'll have to say that MSEC does probably the best job I've seen at bringing forward attention to the unique needs of military connected students out of all of the entities that are involved in that work. MSEC really stands apart from the rest. And we look very closely at the state level of things that come from MSEC and what they're saying, also from Blue Star families and Partners in Promise and other groups that are out there sort of sharing, what military families are experiencing and what military connected students are in need of. And so we kind of tailor what we're doing out in the schools to those kinds of things. So I can't say enough about how much we appreciate that. Today, what I hope to do is sort of showcase what we do in Virginia in terms of supporting schools and their work to around Purple Star, but more importantly, I think Purple Star programming in Virginia would not be successful if it really weren't for the students themselves engaging in the work. And so today I want to sort of highlight the power of leveraging these students in the work. So I do want you to understand there are three things I want you to get out of today's session that I will be talking about. And the first is to really understand how Purple Star programming came to be in Virginia and how it really works. I hope that you, take away an appreciation for encouraging your schools to get peers to be involved in it. And lastly, I hope that you gain a broader understanding of what we're doing to make sure that our Purple Star School programming is strong across the Commonwealth. And so, moving on to the next slide now, let's begin. So you've heard enough about the Military Interstate Children's Compact Commission. So I am one of 51 commissioners that work in supporting our states and supporting our schools and understanding the provisions provided by the compact. What wasn't shared was that the compact is a pretty important piece of legislation. Every member of the compact had to vote into their law the provisions, the model language of the compact, which basically, in a nutshell, levels the playing field for military connected students so they stay on track programmatically and they stay on track for graduation. And there's a lot that goes into that, but essentially it's a pretty important statutory requirement that these states have enacted. So there's federal law, there's compact law, and then there's local laws and policies. And so it's a pretty important feature that allows the school divisions to have the flexibility they need to make sure that these students are taken care of. And I mention this now because it is what sort of drives the work that we have going on in our states to better support our military connected kids. Everything sort of comes back to the compact, and the compact requiring us to do what we can to make sure these kiddos are stay on track and are stay on track programmatically. Next slide, please. So Purple Star programming, and this is sort of how it evolved. So it really started in 2017 in Dayton, Ohio, when we had military spouses there at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base approaching the superintendent in Dayton Public Schools and asking them, how do you really know if the school is supporting military connected students? And so he really had a great answer, is saying, he said he didn't. He didn't have a measure. He just knew it was occurring, but he really couldn't articulate how it was occurring or if it was occurring with fidelity across the school division. So they developed one. They developed a measure, and then Pete Lupibia with Ohio, he was the commissioner. He said, if it's good enough for Dayton, it's good enough for Ohio. And he took it across the state. And around the same time he was doing that, I just came into the fold. So in 2016, I left the Naval District, Washington, became the military student support specialist for the state of Virginia. And he said to me, hey, Dan, you may want to look into this and take it across Virginia. And so I did. And so next slide, please. If we could. And so what we did was we looked at what Ohio had done, and we developed our own qualifiers. And probably one of the most important ingredients in our qualifier is the fact that we have the qualifier that a school has to have an active peer-led transition program. So move on, please, to the next slide. So what came about was our work group looked at research. So we looked at the studies that were being conducted at the University of Georgia and the University and Virginia Tech University. We looked at the National Leadership Summit report that came out of 2009, and both of those were indicating that there was a need to have peers involved in forming relationships with these military connected students as they moved around the country, and that there was a need for professional development. Move on to the next slide, please. The other part of this was another study conducted by Dr. Hunt at the University of San Diego that indicated that if you really truly wanted to create an atmosphere where students felt welcome, then you need to create the space to let it happen. You can't just say it. You need to actually model it inside your school time schedule and formulate a formalized program for that to occur. And that's what led us down the road to making sure that we included a qualifier for peer transition support. Moving on to the next slide. So the peer transition support curriculum that we sort of look at now and what we want to see modeled in all of our schools came out from interviews that we conducted out in the field with students. Our review of Purple Star applications indicated that there was a varying degree of success happening in the schools. And so we didn't think that it was happening, that all schools were really successful with enacting peer support. And so we wanted to take a closer look at it. And so we interviewed the students. We looked back at S2S programming. We looked at Anchor for Life, which is a Trevor Romaine sort of product that the Navy has purchased and encouraged in the schools. And these 6 components are key to, we believe, a successful peer transition support program. So if the programming included these 6 components, they had a better chance of being successful. Moving on, please. And so what we decided to do this year is if in fact we really intend for these schools to be strong, we need to develop a training for them. And this is nothing new. S2S has conducted similar kinds of national trainings for S2S groups, and I know that to be successful. I've attended them myself and saw it as a success. And so we in Virginia believe that you can't say that your programming is strong if you're not training the students in the right way and the staff. And so we decided to conduct a pilot program this June, and we worked with Fairfax County Public Schools because they already have a pretty good approach to training on a smaller scale, but never really brought the students together on a larger scale. So we worked with George Mason University, Fairfax, on to the next slide, please. Fairfax County Public Schools, George Mason University, and Virginia Department of Education. And we really wanted to foster connections. Moving on, please, to the next slide. So really what student-led means is means to foster an opportunity for student leadership and, more importantly, for student voice. Move on to the next slide, please. Student voice is really important because what it does is that it allows the students to become owners of making sure their schools are places where the belonging really happens and the student connectedness really happens. We know that student connectedness is important because CDC has indicated, right? It improves, poor mental health. It supports, the reductions in school violence. It supports, steering away from substance abuse, and improves probably the likelihood that students wouldn't take on risk, especially when it comes to sexual health. Moving on, please, to the next slide. So the safe and supportive schools are very important to Virginia. And we believe that this practice, this peer-led practice, is actually a preventative measure. You're going to have to hit the next button to get to the next thing. And what we're finding from our students when we talk to them about school safety is that they feel like they're encouraged by it. They feel that they are gaining a lot out of the experience. And so I want to now show you a video of a student who encountered a move, and I want you to look at the way that she's responding to her experience.
My parents have both been in the military since before I was born, and we've pretty much moved every 2 years since I was born. I've lived in Texas, I've lived in Tennessee, I lived in Virginia twice, Maryland, Florida, New York, California. We lived in Germany. Oh, in Kansas. I would have never thought I would have ended up in Kansas. I've been here for 1 year, since last January. And I really just wanted to be a student ambassador because I just didn't want kids to feel alone when they come to Edison and when they come to a new school, because I've been in that same exact position at multiple different schools, and the transition is not always easy. It's kind of saddening because you make a lot of friends and you meet a lot of people. I want to cry, but you just meet a lot of people and you make a lot of friends, and it's kind of heartbreaking in a way because, this is my last year of high school and I expected to be there for 4 years and, not to move, but, it's just heartbreaking because, you meet a lot of people and you make a lot of good connections, and it's really scary, coming to a new school. Even when you're 17 years old, you're not 12 anymore, but it's definitely hard, meeting new people and trying to, put yourself into people's groups when they've already, made friends, so it's hard, but once I got here, I've realized that, this is probably the best thing for me, and, it opened me up to opportunities like this, and I've made great friends here, so, in the end, I feel like it's just the best thing possible, So, yeah. And then this over here, all of our records that we broke: swim and dive, track and field, indoor and outdoor. And then, yeah, if you break a record, you get your name on the wall. So the student ambassadors, we're just a group here to help new students integrate into Edison. We get a lot of new students with military-connected families since Fort Belvoir is right over here in the Pentagon. So there's definitely a good mix of students from other countries and military kids. I feel like they can open up to me and tell me how they feel, and I can obviously relate to them and give them pieces of advice on how to meet new people and how to integrate yourself in the school. So I think it definitely helps when I'm talking to a new student and they're how did you do it? And how did you meet so many new people? And I just tell them you just have to get involved. No matter what, even if you're the new student, you feel like everybody's staring at you all the time, you just have to ignore it. You're the new shiny thing. So obviously everybody's gonna stare at you and stuff, but You just have to get connected and like find the right people. One of the questions for my like college career path was, you know, how did you make a difference at Edison High School in the times you've been here? And I was like, man, like I really don't know what to say. But then I thought, I was like, I'm an ambassador. I've helped so many students get connected to Edison. I've helped so many students find friends, find events, get into clubs, and I just feel like that's the biggest impact I could possibly make, even if it's not on the whole school. You know I've made a difference to one student out there, and I'm so grateful that I'm in the ambassador program. It's an amazing program, and I'm sad that like I was only really in it for a year. You know, I wish I could have been here earlier to help more, but I mean, I'm still grateful. My parents.
Okay, great. Thank you. So can we skip Dwayne to the 27th slide, please? So there are a lot of comments that the student ambassadors have had in terms of being involved in the program, and so I don't have time to kind of share all of those with you, but I will say that what the students are sharing is that they love helping other students, that they're breaking down barriers that normally would exist in middle school and high schools. We heard all the time about cliques and bullying and things like that, but they're getting so much out of being involved in supporting other peers and breaking down these barriers, that it's great. And one of the best things that they shared is that they see the promise in helping adults in this work, and that they're encouraged and they're growing from the experience themselves. They're becoming better communicators. They're learning how to be more empathetic. They're better at just in general, just being there for one another. So if we skip to the 27th slide, we'll begin to just talk about what we did there at George Mason University. So again, the partnership between George Mason University, Dr. Jennifer Drake Patrick, it was myself, and Meredith Alea, who's a school counselor in Fairfax County Public Schools. And together what we did was we thought about a structure of the training that really sort of focused on, you know, making sure that the staff were supported, that the students were supported. And so we had to think about the topics, we had to think about which leaders we're going to bring together, we had to think about some of the logistics and some of the resources and how we're going to share this out. And we hope to conduct a second pilot this year to expand it to other school divisions. But we first wanted to develop a structure that we thought was pretty sound and included certain topics and included certain components that we think can be replicated in other school divisions, not just in Fairfax County Public Schools. Moving on to the next slide, please. Beyond that, you can move on. This is basically the theme. You don't have to fit in to belong. We think that that's sort of I think that will stay. This sort of outlines today. So it's like every other convening you probably attended. There's a general session, there's breakout sessions, there were breakout sessions for the students and for the staff. Move on to the next slide, please. So in the student sessions, they had a choice between attending two of these, and we felt like you know, the keynote offered so much in terms of talking about belonging and how you really connect with somebody through understanding a story, or allowing the person to be open to learning about someone else's experience. And then there was asset-based leadership, which is really sort of designed to encourage the students to understand what leadership really involved, and then understanding what kind of assets you need to acquire in order to guide a program, an organization like this, a student ambassador program. And then the last one was just talking about sensitivity training and understanding intercultural connections and how that really looks different. And Fairfax County is really needed there because it's multicultural up in the nation's capital, and in Fairfax County it surrounds it. And so it was important that we have a space for that. Move on to the next slide. And then what happened was that after that, the students along the ways were supposed to be taking notes. And then we had these three leading questions that they took, and then they grabbed that stuff onto the next slide. And they came back together with their sponsors, And then they went through a SOAR process where they all talked about their own individual program strength, their opportunities, their aspirations, and their results. And it was supposed to involve what they learned during the session to guide their work ahead. Move on to the next slide, please. Almost finished here, folks. So what's next? Go ahead and click one more time for me, please. So basically, there's a cycle. So what we've learned is that there's a cycle to programming for peer-led support and Purple Star programming. And if you're really going to have a strong peer-led support team, you need to be thinking about that cycle. And so what we're going to be doing is we're going to be following these students this year. This month, we have planned for sponsor huddles. We have planned to connect with the students and see how they're going, with their programming this year, and if they're really kind of following what we kind of articulated during the training, and see how successful they are. And then we hope to kind of bring a little bit more opportunity for them to be successful. Next slide, please. Again, I mentioned that we're going to conduct another training opportunity to encourage 3 other school divisions to become involved this year with Georgia Mason University. But I hope that, I know I had to speed through that a little bit, but I hope that you all gained something from it. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, and I'll do a better job of explaining what it is that we have going on in Virginia. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to come before us and talk about the initiatives there in Virginia. The ideas of connectedness and belonging are so important for kids of all backgrounds, especially military kids, and really, harnessing the power of peers to not only increase connectedness, but to also, increase leadership skills for the kids. It's just so great to hear about. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Next up, we will hear from Dr. Gregory Leskin. Greg, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Stacy. Hello, everyone. I'm trying to take myself off video, but it will not let me. So I'm going to just go ahead. It's nice to see everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you, Dan and Sue, for your outstanding presentations today. I will start my video. Thank you. Hello there. So let's transition to a focus on approaches to support military students' mental well-being. And I'm going to start by saying, just from the outset, that this requires partnerships, and that we really do want to focus on the partnerships. I represent the SAMHSA-funded National Child Traumatic Stress Network. I'm based at UCLA. We're part of the UCLA Duke National Center for Child Traumatic Stress. We are the coordinating center for the NCTSN. And through our Military and Veteran Families program, we have partnered with a number of federal agencies, including SAMHSA, DOD, DODEA, and the VA, in order to share resources and supports and development of workforce training on evidence-based practices for mental health and trauma-informed practices for military children, military students that we'll highlight today. And even I want to focus on partnerships within the NCTSN. And so in order to continue our longstanding partnership with MSEC and further our goals to increase the opportunities for mental well-being for military students, we're partnering closely with Dr. Sharon Hoover, who I'll share the stage with today, share time with from the National Center for School Mental Health. And we really believe that through these partnerships, we will be able to bring best practices for school-based mental health, trauma-informed approaches to school mental health to military students, both in throughout DODEA as well as in public schools. Next, please. So I'm going to quickly run through the NCTSN, but the NCTSN was established in 2000 with the goal to raise access to services for traumatized children, their families, and communities. And we are seen as a resource for developing and disseminating evidence-based interventions, trauma-informed services, and public and professional education. Next, please. My particular focus in area is on military and veteran families. And through this program, we develop with our partner sites throughout the NCTSN, as well as throughout the DoD and military, really high quality resources, training, fact sheets. We do bring these materials to our DoD providers as well. So we're training civilians to civilian organizations to build capacity to identify and provide trauma-informed mental health services for military families and children, but also those families that may receive services from within DoD. And it's really our goal to stay current with military, VA, and family practices through our partnerships with other organizations like MSEC, Blue Star Families, and many of our other military family advisory network and others. So trying to stay within, very awareness of the current needs of military families and children. Next, please. Okay, so just want to highlight a number of our resources for military and veteran children. These are all available through the NCTSN platform. These particular fact sheets were developed particularly for use by mental health providers and even parents to engage their children if there's concerns around child suicide or substance abuse or child trauma and building resiliency, as well as a focus on the needs of children of veteran families in the immediate transition and long-term transition into veteran life. Next, please. So what are the unique risk factors for military children? It's important, and you've heard today from Sue and Dan about the frequent moves throughout the lives of military kids, the separations from service members, their parents, or the extended family, the extended support families. Military families move around and are separated from their own social support systems. There are an increased sense of burden or stress on a caregiving parent during separations or deployments. There are many, and you heard about today, moves to new schools and communities. There are risks for traumatic experiences for the family of military members who are deployed or as just part of being part of military, that there seems to be an increased risk for exposure to traumatic events occurring for the family or family members. And as Sue mentioned, there's also just the normal everyday stressors that go along with being a child in a school, fitting in, finding friends, moving around, and being able to stay connected to their academic goals and their growth and their own ambitions. Next, please. And we always think about the strengths and always balance those risks with the strengths of the family that are unique to military families, that military families tend to develop and close family structures, that as families are moving around, that these are opportunities that could promote child independence, increase responsibility. There is a sense of honor and duty and value, a commitment to teamwork, increased loyalty, or are mission driven, and really an increase in respect for authority and openness to new experiences. So finding ways to understand the risk, but also bolster and garner and build programs that are thoughtfully reflective of the strengths of these families and children. Next, please. So supporting the resilience, military children, like their civilian counterparts, benefit from when we develop programs that are developmentally appropriate and provide guidance and supports across settings and contexts. So those include schools, extracurricular activities, after-school activities, athletic clubs, and so on. So really trying to think beyond be all the touch points where children may naturally receive supports. That military kids can benefit from additional supports, especially around those critical and key developmental times, such as transitions, deployments, or as a result of trauma, or if a child is experiencing a mental health difficulty or challenge. Next, please. Introduce this NCTSN fact sheet. We really think that this is an important fact sheet that really outlines for parents, for military parents, and kind of an insight into responses to child trauma and some ideas for ways to provide support in the home and as needed, finding supports both within the school or from a professional counselor or therapist, and ways that there's a language that parents can have to both talk to their children about their own experiences if they have experienced a trauma, and to communicate those concerns to a professional in order to seek and receive help for those concerns. Next, please. Okay, turning now to military children in schools. I think we heard Sue say about 80% of military kids are probably in a civilian setting, a civilian or a local educational agency, but about 13% of military kids attend or will attend a DoDEA school, a DoD educational activity school. Civilian schools, however, might lack awareness of military culture or track which students are military children as a specific subgroup that could receive supports. Both Sue and Dan's presentations really get at that issue of awareness, military culture, and being able to identify and provide those supports. Next, please. Schools are a natural, accessible environment where you spend most of their time, 5 days a week, with trusted adults and professionals. And as such, the education sector is the primary system of care for children and adolescents. 70 to 80% of kids who receive mental health services do so in schools, and 20% of students receive some form of school mental health annually. Mental health treatment in schools can be very effective in reducing mental health symptoms, with especially strong effects when treatment is integrated into students' academic setting. That's really what we're going to turn to next, please, is this to support the unique needs of military children, that we pull together these elements, strength-based approaches to promote resiliency, that we're anticipating, planning, and advocating for those transitions, adjustments, disruptions, and the potential for stress and trauma, that we use a multi-tiered system of support, MTSS, and I'll go through those with Dr. Hoover today. And we address those supports across these different domains: academic, behavioral, social, emotional. I heard Sue add college ready. And all of this is within a very integrated data-driven approach. Going to run through these pretty quickly so we save time for Dr. Hoover. But what is an MTSS, a multi-tiered system of support? It's a framework. It's really a framework for being able to think about supports and the needs of children and be able to provide those supports as needed for kids at different time points in their school career. So tier one are those universal school-wide or classroom programs that are really aimed at, providing either social emotional learning or mental health literacy, or addressing school climate across the whole school. Supplemental interventions may be those group interventions or classroom interventions or small group when some additional supports are needed. For example, those transitions or a group of children who are entering a school or have had a particular experience or experiences that need some additional intervention. Tier three are the individual, more intensive interventions for mental health, trauma-informed issues, or require other kinds of more intensive support. Next, please. The tier 1 supports, as I noted, are those that foster positive social, emotional, behavioral skills for all students. They could serve as a foundation for tier 2 and tier 3 behavioral and mental health supports, activity support, positive school climate, teacher and staff well-being, very important, positive behavior and relationships, positive discipline practices, social emotional learning, and mental health literacy. It's really setting the foundation for all the other supports. Next, please. Mentioned that it can be implemented school-wide. Examples include mental health education, awareness, school climate improvement, integration of positive behaviors, reflective practices, social emotional learning, and school-wide messaging like honoring and celebrating military families. Okay, next, please. I'm going to go through the next pretty quickly. There's the tier 2 supports. Tier 2 supports are really, as I said, meant to address those students needing extra supports, transition deployment, are at risk for a problem or concern, or experiencing mild distress, impaired functioning, social peer relationships. Any student can utilize tier 2 supports as needed. Next, please, Dwayne. Some examples, those small group interventions, brief interventions, or those daily, weekly check-ins. Let's turn to tier 3. These are the ones that address mental health concerns of children, for those experiencing significant distress, impaired functionings, problematic, harmful behaviors, physical aggressiveness, traumatic stress reactions, or traumatic grief. Yeah, next, please. And those include some of the evidence-based modalities, some of which we're going to introduce today. Next, please. Here are some examples of some of those mental health interventions, PBIS, positive behavioral interventions and supports with interconnected systems framework is really an integration of mental health staff and interventions within the PBS model. So it's not just a co-located mental health support, it's a fully integrated mental health system. There's those trauma approaches, bounce back, CBITS, trauma responsive school implementation, assessment, a look at the school and its ability to respond to trauma. Project Aware is a funding stream through SAMHSA supporting school-based mental health. The NCTSN has psychological first aid, skills for psychological recovery. Next, please. And here's some resources. Next, please. And my contact. I'm going to stop here and ask Dr. Hoover to join me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Laskin. And thank you all for welcoming me here today, just to share some information about our national centers that are focused on school mental health. I'll say that personally, I'm part of a military connected family. My brother, father, and grandfathers all served in different branches of the military. So this topic is certainly near and dear to my heart. And professionally, I come to this work as a psychologist who's provided mental health supports and services in a variety of settings, including in schools. And as professor at the University of Maryland School of Medicine, I also co-direct the National Center for School Mental Health and direct the National Center for Safe Supportive Schools. So it is a pleasure to be here today. I'll also say personally, I'm a mom to 3 teens, so I'm always looking for, ideas and strategies around mental health supports in schools in my own personal realm as well. So it's great to hear some of the good strategies that have been shared today. So next slide. I'm going to be sharing resources from our 2 national centers today to consider how some of these practices can be adopted and adapted to support military children and families. And I see that a lot of the links were shared in the chat, which is fantastic. So I'm going to move really quickly through some of these slides to keep us on track today. Consider this a big welcome from our multidisciplinary team at the National Center for School Mental Health. Next slide. So our first center that you just saw the group from is the National Center for School Mental Health, and you can see the link at schoolmentalhealth.org. That was established back in 1995 with funding from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Health Resources and Services Administration. And we provide training and technical assistance, policy support, research, and practice support to school mental health efforts around the nation. And then more recently, you can see the center here on the screen is the National Center for Safe Supportive Schools. And Dr. Laskin already mentioned the National Child Traumatic Stress Network. This new center was funded actually back in 2020 as part of that network to provide support to states and territories and districts and schools to advance comprehensive school mental health in a way that really integrates trauma-informed and healing-centered practices and policies. And again, that link is in the chat. Next slide. I want to recognize one of my colleagues, Dr. Brittany Patterson, who works on this specific work with me at our National Center. As a child growing up in a military family, she has lived experience, but also expertise that she applies to military-connected students, including their transitions from school to school. And these are some of her specialty areas here. Next slide. So I'm just going to share with you a few of the resources that we have put out to the field to advance comprehensive school mental health systems. Again, many of these either speak to the context for military-connected kids and families or could be adapted for those contexts. So this is a guidance from the field that came out just a couple of years ago that's really the why, what, how of comprehensive school mental health systems. Next slide. It goes into some of what you've already heard from a couple of our speakers about kind of how do we define comprehensive school mental health systems. Next slide. And provides some of the multi-tiered systems of support context. So it not only defines it, as we just heard from Dr. Laskin, but gives examples of how states and districts are really concretizing this in their practices. On the next slide, one of the things that we focus quite a bit on is how community partners can partner with schools to augment that multi-tiered system of support. So we really try to emphasize that schools should not carry the responsibility, the burden for student mental health on their shoulders alone, that it really should be done hopefully in a seamless way with community partners. But there's a lot of kind of strategies that are needed to make that happen. So this is just one example, illustration of how we think about community partners coming in, often to provide kind of those supports and services further up that multi-tiered system of support. On the next slide, we share a specific example of a resource that was put out to the field in collaboration with the National Association of School Psychologists and our National Center. This was really speaking to the idea that we need to provide supports and services by mental health professionals, both that are hired by the district and schools and hired by community partners, whether it's hospital systems, outpatient community mental health centers, et cetera. And this goes into some very specific strategies for how to accomplish that. And again, all of these resources are linked in the chat. On the next slide, one of the things that our center does quite a bit of it is working with state and territory leaders within departments of education and behavioral health to really help them establish comprehensive school mental health system frameworks. Many states and territories now have these, some that are beautifully illustrated to align with the geography of their state, as you can see here in Wisconsin and Colorado. On the next slide, we've seen many districts really adopt these state frameworks to tailor them to their unique districts. So there's a lot on this slide, but this speaks to what's happening in Massachusetts and really applies a state framework and then draws it down to what's happening in the specific districts, both with respect to policies and practices for the multi-tiered system of supports for school mental health. And then here it's a little more finely illustrated also for trauma supports in schools, and that link is also in the chat. A few more ways that we support states and districts. We provide training tools for our partners. So this is an example of one that we did in partnership with the National Mental Health Technology Transfer Center Network that's funded by SAMHSA. This is a free online training for educators called ClassroomWise, Classroom Wellbeing Information and Strategies for Educators. On the next slide, you can see that it is accompanied by a resource collection, lots of good videos with demonstrations for how to create safe, supportive schools, but also how to support students who may be experiencing mental health challenges in your classroom. On the next slide, You can see another way that we support the field is to help our partners think about how can they fund and resource and also sustain comprehensive school mental health systems. This is an example of a resource we put out in partnership with the Healthy Schools Campaign and the Council for Chief State School Officers that really spoke to how to use COVID recovery funds to support student and staff well-being. On the next slide. One of the things that we also do with our partners is really work with them to think about how to advocate for better advancing comprehensive school mental health systems. So we worked with a family-run executive directors leadership association, also known as FREDLA, to develop some advocacy tools on advancing school mental health. There's one tool designed specifically for families to encourage them to advocate, and then also one that speaks directly to policymakers, decision makers, whether it's state legislators or a school board, for example, at a local district. Another way on the next slide that we help to advance policy at the state level, but also national, federal level, and even locally, is to take a look at what policies there are and how states and others are doing in this space. And a group that we've partnered with that's really moved mountains in terms of advancing school mental health policy in the last couple of years is Inseparable, and that organization leads what's called the Hopeful Futures campaign. Last year, they put out the first ever National School Mental Health Report Card, where they really drilled down into each state and took a look at how they were doing in 8 key policy areas. So I'd encourage you to check out those report cards. On the next slide, you can see they also have put out now 2 state legislative guides to take a look at what are the legislative efforts that are happening across the nation to help advance key areas of school mental health. It's a fantastic guide, and a lot of states have looked to this to really see what other states are doing, not only how well they're doing, but what other states are doing to think about how to advance school mental health in their local communities and in their states. On the next slide, you can see one of the tools that we have put out to the field that has been very well utilized. We've got thousands of schools and districts now using the SHAPE system to assess their school mental health quality and to really engage in continuous quality improvement. So it's a free online platform. Any individual school, district, and state team can go in and assess how they're doing in terms of the best practices in comprehensive school mental health, and then really access a huge repository of resources to help them advance this work. On the next slide, you can see the assessment domains that all of those districts and schools are assessing themselves in, some of those key areas that we've heard from a number of our speakers. On the next slide, you can see that they are accompanied by quality guides that provide some background on some of these core topics, as well as action steps and examples from the field of how schools and districts can move these forward. And then on the next slide, we just wanted to share that all of these domains and kind of best practice content areas were put into implementation guides in partnership with the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center Network that I've already mentioned, the MHTTC network. So they put together with our national center, with funding from SAMHSA, on the next slide, a set of guidance modules that really supports districts in putting on the ground each of these core areas of comprehensive school mental health. So for example, we know there are best practices in mental health screening in schools, but how do you actually do that on the ground level? So I'd encourage you to check out those guidance modules. And then finally, on the next slide, one of the things that our center has been charged with, and that's really advanced the work for us as a national center, but also at state and local levels, is called a COIN, or a Collaborative Improvement and Innovation Network. And this was funded, again, out of HHS and specifically out of the Health Resources and Services Administration. Essentially, this is a learning collaborative framework that's adopted from the Institute for Healthcare Improvement. And we worked with states and districts around the nation. You can see on the next slide, we started with districts around the nation. So we were really supporting school districts and their schools in advancing comprehensive school mental health systems. And then we were charged, on the next slide, with supporting states around the nation. So you can see the states that signed up, they applied to engage with us for these 15-month learning collaboratives. And all of these states were actively collecting data on changes to advance comprehensive school mental health systems. So I'm going to wrap up there. On the next slide is my contact information, as well as some of the links to our centers. And again, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to our facilitator today. And thank you again for welcoming me.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all of our presenters for really giving us a good overview of the Purple Star Schools Initiative, hearing from the state of Virginia about how they're enacting those services, and also hearing from Dr. Luskin and Dr. Hoover about the resources that are available for implementation, both at the practice level and the policy level. Really appreciate you all providing this holistic overview. We do have a few minutes on the books for questions and answers, and there are a few that have come through the chat pod um, that I wanted to touch on. There were a couple of questions about, not only the military identity of kids, but the intersection of other identities, like military kids with special education needs, and military kids um, who might come from a bilingual home, where potentially English is not the primary language at home. So just wanted to open that up for anyone who might want to speak to that intersectionality, and how your programs might support schools in supporting those kids with multiple identities. And Sue Lopez, I saw you nod your head first. So, so I'm wondering if you have any particular thoughts from the perspective of Purple Star Schools and MSEC.
I was trying to process because I lost you for a second. Could you repeat the question again?
I apologize.
Trying to
I
hear you. I'm
apologize for
sorry.
putting you on the spot. A question about kids that might not only be military kids, but might also have special education needs, or language, cultural and linguistic inclusion needs. So I know that particularly with Purple Star Schools, you all talked about the survey that you all did, and how kind of 504 plans and IEP plans are something that military kids might need to transfer. So wondering if you could speak to those pieces.
It's challenging because the requirements change state by state, and students who have an IEP or a 504, as they change, certain states recognize or don't recognize some of those plans. So it really depends on your district, your outgoing district, your incoming district, to communicate for the needs of the student in transition, but then also leveraging tech resources like iPads and things like that to help students. That really is a local level issue at a district or a campus, not a Purple Star issue, because that comes back to the school administration and the policies in that district and the state. So we do hope that those types of issues will be considered. I know that across the nation, language can be a barrier, but those seem to be getting addressed with tech resources that can advocate between a student and a teacher or a paraprofessional. Dr. Hoover, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't think so. Thank you so much for inviting me to, but I know there are some other questions, so I'm going to pass it back to Stacy.
Thank you. I appreciate that input there. There were a couple of other questions, and I'm trying to just kind of highlight a couple more because I know that we are closing in on our time together. There were a couple of points brought up about the Military and Interstate Children's Compact Commission, also known as MIC3, and kind of how that's applied across states. And this is more of if there's something that you'd like to enter in the chat, where participants might be able to learn a little bit more about MIC3, and how that might be potentially enacted in their state. So again, that's kind of more of an invitation to potentially drop any information in the chat that you might have for individuals to learn more about that resource. There were also a couple of questions related to just figuring out how to find out where Purple Star schools are located within your state. And I believe that there might be a response to that, kind of figuring out where Purple Star schools are located within your state.
You can always check Military One Source legislative map to check on current legislation being passed by state, but I'm proud to say that 40 states have passed Purple Star legislation. And thank you, Pete Lapiva, for creating such an amazing initiative as Purple Star Schools. There are multiple states still pending, but almost the whole country is purple now. So really it comes down to how that is being implemented, sustained, and continual growth is occurring. You can also refer to the MSEC website on our Purple Star map to see what states have passed legislation. We keep updating that every quarter, so you'll continue to see changes on the MSEC military child education website as well.
Thank you for that. And I'll just raise one more question because we had a couple of questions about this. I know that we were talking primarily about school-aged kids, but there were a handful of questions about early childhood education and how there might be mental health support incorporated for those preschool age kids. So wanted to open that up to our presenters, if there were any particular thoughts that you all had on mental health for early childhood children.
I'll just say two quick things and then pass it on for more military specific content. So on the SHAPE system that I mentioned earlier, we do have a preschool version of the school mental health quality assessment. So early childhood settings can go in and not only assess how they're doing with respect to early childhood best practices, but there's also an early childhood specific resource repository to help them advance in that area. And then certainly we look a lot to the early childhood mental health consultation model, which a lot of states do have, and to the Cephaler pyramid model, which is kind of the early childhood version of PBIS that Dr. Laskin referred to earlier.
Thank you for that. Can we go to the next slide? Just wanted to remind you all of the SAMHSA mission and the SAMHSA website there. Next slide, please. And also leave you with information for SAMHSA's SMVF TA Center and how to contact us. In closing, Sue Lopez, you typed something in the chat that only came to hosts and panelists, but I was hoping that you would actually just read that statement for the attendees because it's a good way to close our session today. So I will defer the closing to you.
Sure. Thank you for the opportunity. I believe that the synergy that we have between multi-tier systems of support, looking at how comprehensive school counseling models and program implementation along with the Purple Star school initiatives will help create like a holistic framework to address the unique needs of military connected students who experience different types of transition in their life. And it helps to foster all of this conversation is exciting for me because as a military family who raised 2 children and help with multiple children across national school districts, we want to look at how we can make this easier academically, socially, emotionally, and also to support development, basic developmental needs. And we want to do that through our community partnerships and collaboration. So I'm thankful for Dr. Luskin and the National Center for Trauma Stress Network and Dr. Hoover's work that really narrowed down how this actually happened. So excited just to continue this conversation and to share that we are collaborating and partnering for the greater good. And so thank you for everyone on the panel and for all of the work that you do. Truly inspiring.
Thank you all. Appreciate the time that our presenters gave and appreciate those who joined us to hear more about this important topic about supporting military kids. Have a great day, everybody.